All right. So thanks for joining. My topic is Age of the Learner. And what I'm going to focus on is something that we all deal with in our work life, right? We're constantly being trained. So if I was to ask you, when was the last time you took a training? Most likely all of us have done it in the last couple of weeks. So when we talk about training, we have to focus on what's the mission, what's the goal, and the objective. Well, if our training systems themselves lack certain things, then our mission is kind of in jeopardy too, right? We're not properly being trained, we're not properly being equipped with the necessary resources. So Adobe has been really focusing on the user experience and how can we enable a learning environment or a environment where people can come in, converse, communicate, engage with each other. So beyond just getting directed learning, they can actually have a place where they can share their own knowledge, share their own expertise, and not only grow their own skill sets, but grow as a community. So if I was to ask many of you, how many of you recall the old library cards when you used to go to the book and you used to see the library card with all the names listed out of all the people that have checked it out? There was an interesting thing about this. The librarian really didn't think through how many times are people checking out the book, and maybe I should place this book in a certain shelf or a certain location for better marketing purposes. At the same time, as a student, if you saw the name of a person that you knew, it's directly connected you to the book. It made yourself interested in what this book is about because a friend of yours or someone you know checked it out before you. So that connection with the peer does something to us psychologically, right? And I'm talking to you about this because if you look at what's happening out in the commercial world or in the social world, it's astounding the amount of content that's being generated from end users, so the consumers themselves. That content can actually provide a lot of social learning to us as an organization, where we can take that input to understand that feedback and provide them the necessary resources to better train themselves. So we've been traditionally focusing on formal learning, which is what most organizations do today. We have missed the opportunity on the social learning aspects. So that's what I'm going to touch upon and help you understand where that connection is. The middle piece of analytics, that's something that Adobe also provides with their own platform to help understand, well, what's going out in the learning world, who are some of the subject matter experts. So based on user activity, based on questions and answers, based on what they've been liking, what they've been rating, you can start to understand the audience and actually highlight or uplift some of those subject matter experts to the larger community. So we can actually benefit from talking within each other. I can reach out to a person that I know who's been writing a lot of blogs on cybersecurity, and I'm interested in the cyberspace. I can reach out to that person. So something that's happened really in the commercial world that in the last 5 to 10 years, we saw a lot of disruptive players come in, whether it's Uber, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Airbnb. Out of nowhere, Airbnb is now the biggest kind of hotel chain in a way, right? They have the largest number of rooms available in the market. Uber transformed the taxi industry. You have Netflix that took out Blockbuster and all those video rental stores. And if you look at something that's common across all these disruptive players is that social component. They had an ability to connect to people, but then also connect people to others and have some sort of a recommendation engine built into it. So if we look at what those players are looking at, they're customer obsessed, right? They're doing everything that's possible to personalize their app, their product, their business to the consumer. They're looking at, well, what can we do from a community perspective? What kind of feedback can I get? And then directly and quickly, dynamically change the content, change the product around it. So you end up creating a lot of user-generated content in the process that's coming from the larger community. So in a learner world, if we take the customer and change that to a learner in a training environment, there really is no difference. The same things apply in the e-learning world as well, whether it's adaptive learning, scaffold learning, mobile learning, or social learning. So something that we lost when we went to the digital age is those things that we were able to do in the classroom. For instance, you would have group discussions. You know, the instructor would talk about a topic, and he would get questions, he would get feedback. When we moved from that classroom setting to an online setting, we lost some of that adaptiveness, some of that dynamicness, ability to connect with each other. And then we started doing some online training in a virtual session or virtual classroom, which was still kind of training in isolation. It did not fully allow peers to have that peer-to-peer connection. It didn't really allow people to ask questions and get meaningful feedback. So how do we retain that ability for someone to raise their hand and ask a question? Because that psychologically tells you that that person is learning, he's trying to understand, that's why he has a question, right? So that element is kind of the key in what we're focusing on with our platform. So I'm assuming many of you would relate to this slide. So if you look at from a learning perspective, the learning that we do today in our work environment is no longer sometimes relevant. It's not mobile friendly, so we can't really access it on our mobile devices. It doesn't really have a social component to it, and it's very isolated. And if you look at how the content is created, managed, and then measured, there's many issues around that too. Content is not developed in a uniform way. It's sometimes developed using different sets of tools. Not all the content works in the platform. Then you have IA and security issues on top of that. So what ends up happening is organizations go out there and they buy point products over time, and then you try to make it all work together, and then you end up with all these different swim lanes with all the different issues, right? So what Adobe's doing is putting the focus back on the learner. And what they're saying is, well, let's think about the learner first, and then think about the technology and then what we need to do with that technology. So if I take the learner and kind of put it as the center of the focus, and then bring creation of the content, management of that content, and then measurement of that content around that learner, that kind of gives us a framework, right? It gives us a framework of what needs to focus. So from a content perspective, we know we need to have catalogs. We need to have the ability to have assignments, virtual classrooms. From a performance standpoint, we know we need to be able to rate them, quiz them, grade them. And then we need probably some simulations or scenario-based learning that needs to be created as well. Now, if I add the social elements to it, that allows us to then broaden the scope of what a learner would really relate to. Now I can present a community-based environment where people can join into a more focused group, and multiple people can, so think of it in this sense. You can take, for instance, the larger army. Now, army itself has different battalions. You can divide army up into different bases. So by doing it in a smaller group, it allows for each group to get a much more personalized and focused attention. And that also gives us metrics on how well that particular group is doing compared to other groups. So both from a consumption perspective as a learner, it allows you to find more relevant information, but as an organizational level, you can better understand the audiences across the organization. And the ability to track the engagement. So looking at what people are looking at, what content people are not looking at is a key element to that. So you might create all these training courses, but if no one is really paying attention to it, or no one's really looking at that content, you're wasting a lot of labor and man hours behind it, right? So getting those levels of insights is a key. So I mentioned mobile and social. So what our platform does is a single platform called Adobe Experience Manager, which allows you to build a learning environment with kind of like, think of it like Lego blocks or building blocks. You choose what you want in your learning environment. I would love to have a blogging capability. I would love to have ability where people can ask questions and get answers crowdsourced. I love to have a course catalog. So you choose the capabilities that you want to have in your environment, and then the platform is able to deliver it across different devices, different browsers, different mobile platforms, and so forth. So if I take those pieces, those functionalities, and put them in groups or building blocks, and if I group them together, you get capabilities such as ability to have a user profile. The profile has badging and gamification. It's scoring. So as a user goes into the system and he takes a course, then he asks a question, he comments on someone else's post, he rates a piece of content. All those metrics, all that activity that the user is doing starts to earn them certain level of scores. Based on the rules you define, certain levels of scores gives you higher badges. What that really is doing is creating a mechanism to motivate users to really start to interact, really take participation. Today, when we go into learning environments, we're forced to go into it because I have to take a test, I have to take a course, and we leave right away. Whereas in this world now, we're trying to bring a place where people can actually remain and engage with each other, share information, have knowledge management built into it. And from an administrator perspective, you actually get a lot of flexibility to building a site in a more out-of-box fashion, changing the site dynamically without having to go into code, and actually design the site to your liking, however you want to come up with that design. In most traditional learning environments or even LMSs, you don't have that flexibility. When you buy it, you get what you get. You really can't change the user experience. By us building the architecture in a way where the functionality is separate from the user design and from the site structure, it allows us to be much more dynamic and flexible. So those are kind of the high-level building blocks. What we really call this solution is experience-driven learning, because the focus is on the experience. If the experience is not going to attract the user, you can be rest assured that they may not be learning, right? Even before you get to the point of collecting quizzes and grades and scores, they may not be as interested in the learning environment. So I'm going to stop here and actually take a question, one or two, and then actually jump into a live demo to actually give you a sense of what this platform looks like. So is there any comments or questions? Yeah.
Is there a way to turn gamification off? Because for, when you're talking about like educating senior level professionals,
yeah,
like you see is sort of a gimmick.
Yeah, so the great question. The question is, can we turn off the gamification? Because at senior level, it could appear to be like a gimmick, right? So yes, gamification can be turned off. So it's not necessarily something that you have to have. So if I go back to this slide where all the different capabilities are listed, so whether you're looking at a blogging capability or badging capability or scoring metrics, these are all options to turn on and off. And what we see typically, like in the Air Force at large, they have many groups, and certain groups were really into gamification, certain groups were not. So as each group gets their own little learning environment within one platform, they have the ability to turn it on and off, right? So that's kind of part of the flexibility. Same thing goes on a course. So we actually provide the ability to publish a course with a rating mechanism and a comment stream, similar to you going on Amazon or Netflix. Well, if it's an IA awareness course that everyone has to take every year, and we know everyone hates it, you may not want to turn on the rating and a comment on it, right? So you have that option to turn it off. All right, so let me jump into a demo to kind of give you a flavor of what this looks like. All right, so I'm going to move the mic a little bit. So this is an example environment, kind of a proof of concept that we had come up with to showcase the capabilities of the platform. So in this site, I'm coming into a learning site. I'm logged in as Allison. So Allison, if I click on her name, you will see has her own little profile. So that profile describes Allison's interest. It may actually define or describe her rank, her organization association. Right now I have some basic dummy data, but the idea is to provide a profile that can allow you to see what MOS, what rank, what organization you belong to, what base you belong to, so you can turn all those features on and off. On the right-hand side, you're seeing two areas, one called following and another called followers. So we have actually capabilities of what you see on Twitter built into the platform. So you have an ability to follow other individuals, and people can follow you. And then similarly, you can even message them, kind of similar to Facebook messaging. So if I have a question and I know that this is the course author, I can reach out to that person, send them a question, all within the platform, and not have to go to email, right, or clutter your inbox, essentially. So you have a basic inbox. You can mark messages read, unread, and so forth. So lightweight email type capability. You also have a Facebook wall-like mechanism called activity stream, which in one place gives me a sense of what's happening in the overall learning site. So what people are doing, what they're posting, what content is coming up, and then I can look at my own activities under the My Activities tab, which filters down the content that I have taken part in. Or I can go to the Following tab. So unlike Twitter, where you're following users in our platform, you're following users as well as content. So where that's critical is, let's say I'm in the file library, which is kind of like a lightweight Dropbox capability, and I'm looking at a study guide or I'm looking at a cyberspace document, and I see that this particular training document I'm really interested in. I can actually follow this file. And what that does is anytime there's an update to it, there's a comment to it, or a rating to it, I will see that activity under the Following tab. So the ability to follow content is not just limited to files and documents. You can also follow forums, people's posts. You can follow calendar activities. So you might go to the events section and you see that there is a 3-day classroom training happening at a certain campus. You can follow that particular activity as well. So the activity stream kind of becomes a centralized hub for you to go to and kind of navigate your site from there. Now you have the course catalog, of course. So this is where you can see all the available trainings that are available to you, all the different content that's out there. Even though you're in the course catalog, it will actually identify if you are in progress of that training. It will identify if you've already completed that training. And anything that's new in the system is marked new as well. I can filter this. So if I really want to and look at only cybersecurity courses, I can select that tag, and then the entire course catalog gets filtered for me, right? I only have 4 courses here from the demo perspective, but you get the idea. You can have a large library of training content, and it kind of filters it for you. You also can see the ratings it's generating from the user community. Now, if I'm in the training session and on the training page, I can actually see who the author is. And the course also identifies a subject matter expert. So in the event that I really like this particular topic, and I want to know what else I should take, what are the kind of trainings I need to look at, I can reach out to that SME and get some feedback. If I have some technical issues with the platform or with the course itself, I can reach out to the technical point of help. And this is where you see people come in and actually provide some informal feedback around the training, whether this course is great or if there's any constructive criticism, whatever it may be. Now, all these comments are moderated, so you can actually, first of all, turn it on and off. If you do choose to turn it on, you can set up rules to say that anytime these terms or this terminology is put into a comment, don't even post it, or you can actually have a workflow where it gets through a approval before showing up on the live site. So you have some ways of controlling and moderating the content itself. Now, I would debate that. I mean, in many events like these, content is self-moderated. No one's going to put themselves out there and say something that they shouldn't be, because they will be identifying themselves, because it kind of says who said it, right? So there should some self-moderation there. Now you have My Courses page, which is kind of the concept of any training, any content that you've been enrolled in or you've been particularly assigned that shows up under your own page. You can come in and you can search for content. I can look at it in a list view, rather, if I choose to, and I can see which ones I've completed, which ones are past due. I can change or hide some of the items in the column as I like. So each user gets to choose how they want to see this page. If I take a course, I'm going to jump to the administrative side of it for a second and show you what kind of reporting and metrics that are collected in the background. So I'm jumping into the admin screen, and for each of the courses that I am publishing, they're all stored under resources. So I'm going to go to the particular site that I was using, and here's my one of the sample courses. I can click on report, and this report will basically show me what's happening with this course, all the people that were assigned to take the class, how well are they doing. And if I scroll below, each of those individuals are listed out, as well as their score, their pass complete, fail, a status. I can filter this by names of individual. So if I know that I want to look at Jason's status, I type in Jason and it pulls up the status showing that he has completed and scored 100 on it, right? The report is also gives me a sense on the top how many people were assigned and how many people have not completed or in progress. And if it's a video course, which we tend to do a lot of in the training environments, I will see some additional data. So not only I get a timeline view, which will show me overall engagement of users coming into this page and to the course, how many people are playing it versus just coming to the page but never playing it. If you do play the file or the video, you're watching it, and you leave at the first minute mark or the second minute mark, it actually tracks that. So the analytics will tell you that the users are dropping out at the 1 minute mark, right? Or how many users are coming in from mobile versus desktop. And if you want to look at down further, we can even tell you how many are using Internet Explorer or Firefox or Android versus iPads. So all these detailed metrics are also stored and recorded. And with video and SCORM-based training, you can actually see how much of the content they have finished or where are they in the overall status. Going back to the environment, so some of the things that we do from a social standpoint is we allow people to come in and ask questions. So I talked a little bit earlier about that we've kind of lost that ability to ask a question and converse with our peers. So we provide a space where people can come in, they can simply click on new question and post a question out there. I'm going to cancel this and just show you an existing one. And as you look at the list of questions, you'll notice that some of them have been tagged as answered, while some have not. So what this is doing, and it's different than a typical FAQ, is you're getting a much more dynamic list of questions that are much more relevant and new, because all the new and the latest stuff is on the top. But also you're seeing which ones have been answered. So instead of reading a threaded discussion or a forum post with many comments and replies, you can go straight to the particular response that actually helps solve the problem. So when I click on this question, I will see the two responses, and I see that this particular response is the one that's tagged. Who's tagging it? That's actually the person who asked the question in the first place. So they have the ownership or the ability to tag what actually helped them. And when others come in, they can give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, some like or dislike, and put their own comments on the bottom. Similarly, if you're in a forum, you can imagine people coming in and having a good amount of dialogue. We actually provide ability to translate as well. So let's say in a use case of where foreign militaries are interacting with our military, or even in a cyberspace environment, someone can come in and post a comment in German or French. The system will recognize that and provide the ability for it to be translated on the fly. So I see that this Allison has come in and put a comment in here in a foreign language, and I have an option to hit translate. When I hit translate, the comment gets translated to English on the fly. So that can be pretty useful when you're communicating across the borders, right? The last thing I want to show you is the ability to create smaller groups or smaller sub-communities. So as part of the overall learning site, you can compartmentalize that. So let's say the Air Force welfare may want to have their own community. When I click into the welfare community, you notice that they're using discussions, which is basically the forms capability. They're using files, which is the same capability as file library. And then they have what's new, which is the same capability as activity stream, but this is more specific to their group. And all the updates in the activity stream are around that group. So what you're really seeing is the ability to take any or all of the functionality at the site level and bring it down to a smaller sub-community or a subgroup and let them have their information sharing, their knowledge management within that group. And this is where a lot of times we see organizations say, you know, as large of an organization we may be with 1 million+ people, like the Army, for instance, we have many smaller sub-communities that we need to cater to. How can I provide them a space, them an environment where they can go in, own that space, own the content, and still have the same level of interactions? So this allows us to kind of handle that kind of a use case. I'll stop here with the demo. If there's no other questions or comments. Yep.